Well, it's 9:02, so we'll get started. I'm sure there'll be more people jumping on. It's great to see all of you here today. Thank you for attending our Decade of Charitable Giving presentation. I see some Community Foundation board members and staff, many of our nonprofit partners. I'm just pleased to welcome you today on behalf of all of us here at the Community Foundation, including our new president and CEO, Danita Nias. Several community foundations across Florida commissioned this study you'll hear about today, and we are grateful to our friends at the Florida Nonprofit Alliance for their work in compiling this data. We know that the best indicators of future giving are GDP growth, S&P performance, and past giving history. So today we're really going to get a great view of what's happened in giving in our counties, and which will hopefully inform our planning for future years to come. So it's especially meaningful that we now have some good history on giving in Florida and Palm Beach County. And again, we're thankful to our friends at the Florida Nonprofit Alliance for giving us this opportunity. A few housekeeping items. Once our introductions are complete and the presentations begin, we would just like to ask you to turn your cameras off and mute your sound so we can pay 100% attention to our presenters. Then when we come back for the Q&A session, please turn your cameras and your sound back on, and we'll have a nice time to ask some questions. During the presentation, if you have a question, just throw it in the chat. We may get to some questions during the presentation, but if not, we'll cover those at the end. We are recording this session today. If you are uncomfortable being recorded and you don't mind turning off your camera, that's fine. Or if you want to go off the presentation altogether, we will be providing these slides to everybody that's attending today, and we'll probably put them on our website as well. So lots of people can access this wonderful data. So I think that's it for me. Welcome again from the Community Foundation for Palm Beach and Martin Counties. I'm Vicki Pugh. If I didn't introduce myself, I'm our Vice President for Philanthropic Giving. So I'm especially excited to hear the outcomes of this data survey, and pleased to welcome our friends from the Florida Nonprofit Alliance, Sabine Purwiz and Leah McDermott. So thank you, ladies, for being on the call today, and we're just really going to look forward to what you have to say to us today.
Thank you so much, Vicki. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sabine Purwiz. I'm with the Florida Nonprofit Alliance, and I'm delighted to serve as the president and CEO. And Leah will be joining us in a little bit for her part of the presentation, and she is our program manager. In case you're not familiar with the Florida Nonprofit Alliance, our mission is the state's collective voice, respected advocate, effective connector, and powerful mobilizer for the nonprofit sector. We are the state's nonprofit state association. We're part of the National Council of Nonprofits. And as you can see on the slides in front of you, we join a collaborative of over 40 statewide nonprofit associations across the country. This really allows us to leverage both challenges and opportunities as they arise around the country so that we can knowledge share with one another and stay informed for the sector. Our organization is a membership-based organization, and what that includes for our members is representation in Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. for the nonprofit sector, representation of Florida state agencies, that includes the Florida Department of State, Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Department of Finance, and the Attorney General's office, really the entities that regulate the sector. Our newsletters, our member updates, membership to the Nonprofit Risk Management Center, job postings, etc. So we really try to leverage information that we know you need and resources that you feel are valuable to you so that we can provide those as your membership. One of the things that we provide at no cost to anybody and everybody is our newsletter. We really do encourage you to subscribe to these if you have an advocacy lens for your organization. This allows you to stay informed with what's happening both statewide and nationally, and we only send one of these out per month. Some of the resources that we provide to the state's nonprofit sector that really, again, come from the advocacy lens include our policy agenda, our legislative information guide, how to lobby, election guidelines, especially when we are entering election cycles, COVID-19 relief updates, information on charitable giving, board advocacy documentations, and then also our research portfolio. We really take pride in this because it allows us to have a benchmark for the state's nonprofit sector, everything from how COVID-19 has affected nonprofits, the economic impact of our state's sector. Again, all this information for our research is available free of charge on flnonprofits.org, and it allows you to filter information by county, by region, and have the data for the state. And then, of course, tools that you can use to have better capacity from the advocacy perspective. So legal compliance, starting a nonprofit, state and FEMA grant trainings, employment law updates, et cetera. Really information that we want to help provide to you when you don't have that staff capacity for that information. Lastly, just to look at our calendar to give you a sense of what's coming up for us. We have a consultant affinity group. We have a June policy call. This is for members only that allows us to go deeper dive into what's happening in Tallahassee. And of course, advocacy one-on-one, whether it be for your board members, your volunteers, or for your staff, really just to get a sense of how to start from the advocacy perspective. So with that, we're going to get into the data. And I'm looking both ways because I have two screens. So just excuse me for that if it doesn't look like I'm looking at you. So this research was really important to us. As Vicki mentioned, it was commissioned by community foundations across the state. And this data came to be because a lot of Floridians have the assumption, especially those of us that work in the sector, that when people migrate to Florida, we have about 800 individuals who come to us per day. They don't necessarily give within the state, or they come at a different phase in life, so they're not looking to volunteer. So this data was really looking at what's the trajectory? How did this benchmark come to be? How did this hypothesis come to be? So we were looking at data over the last 10 years just to see if we can see any trends emerging for the sector. Without the support that we received from the foundations, it would not have been possible. So I just want to take 1 minute to highlight the Community Foundation for Palm Beach, Martin County, along with the Central Florida Foundation, Community Foundation of Broward, Community Foundation of Collier, Community Foundation of Sarasota, Gulf Coast Community Foundation, and Southwest Florida Community Foundation, and finally the Community Foundation of Northeast Florida, for really being leaders in commissioning this work and also seeing the value add for this. So today's data is going to be looking at specifically individual giving, but charitable giving comes from multiple sources, as we know. According to Giving USA's most recent data, foundations are providing 18% of all giving. Bequests provide 9% of all giving. And again, bequests are gifts from the estates of individuals who are deceased. Corporations provide 5% of all giving. But the greatest amount of individual giving for US charities comes from individuals, 68%. Our conversation today is not going to focus on the causes or organizations that individuals give to, but rather on the sources of the gifts, the people who make the gifts. Particularly, we're going to be looking at how individual giving by Floridians has changed in recent years and what additional changes we think might be coming in the near future. For benchmark perspectives, we are fortunate that we can look back to research that was done at the start of the century. In 2003, the Florida Philanthropic Network commissioned a study of philanthropy in the Sunshine State. While much of that report dealt with charitable foundations, it also included data on individual giving at that time. Today's release is supported and builds on that report. It updates the research with data on individual giving by Floridians from 2011 to 2018, the last year for which we have complete data so far. So before we begin, we just wanted to be clear on who and what is counting in this research. This study, like philanthropy in the Sunshine State and most other giving studies, is based on the IRS data about individual taxpayers' deductions for charitable giving. The IRS data provides the most reliable picture of charitable giving at the state and local level. The data is readily accessible and consistent over time, which allows us to really look at longitudinal research and compare apples to apples. Of course, the IRS data only captures charitable giving by those who report a charitable contribution on their tax return. Contributions large or small from those who do not report are not included. Nonetheless, the IRS accounts historically capture the vast majority of charitable gifts made in a given year, and the consistency of this data has enabled us to reliably track trends over time. As of 2018, changes in US tax law caused major changes in the way American taxpayers reported charitable contributions, effectively resetting the bar for some of these trend lines. This study is the first to capture the impact of those changes, so let's begin. And you're going to be hearing a lot of terminology. So for those of us that are not finance individuals, this chart really looks at the definitions in case you need to go back and look at what the terminology we're referring to. So for Florida, as we look at from the 1990s into the 21st century, charitable giving by state residents was robust. In 1997, Floridians reported giving more than $8 billion to charity. By 2011, giving had grown to more than $10 billion. And by 2007, Floridians reported almost $13 billion in charitable giving. And just to note, all of these amounts have been adjusted for inflation so that we're comparing accurately. Then the Great Recession hit with record unemployment at that time, record foreclosures, and falling markets. Charitable giving declined sharply, falling well below $10 billion at its lowest point. Recovery was slow, and it was not until 2015 that Florida's individual giving returned to the levels of 2007. In 2016, Floridians gave $13.5 billion. The average gift was roughly $7,300, more than the national average of $6,500. So now we're going to look at the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which really paved the way of how things have shifted. So I'll turn it over to Leah.
Great. Hi, everyone. And just a reminder, if you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to put those into the chat. We'll grab them as we go or at the end. So in 2017, Congress passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which took effect in 2018. Among many things, the act nearly doubled the standard deduction for tax filers. So think about this example. If you were a married couple with $10,000 in tax deductions in 2017, you could make a $5,000 gift to your alma mater and exceed the standard deduction. That gift would reduce your taxes. But the next year, if you were a married couple with the same $10,000 in tax deductions, you would have to give away more than $14,000 to achieve any reduction to your tax bill. This change in tax law for most taxpayers significantly diminished the tax benefits of charitable contributions. So two things happened as a result of that. First, in 2017, charitable giving spiked to almost $18 billion for the state as Floridians sought to take advantage of the old rules for deducting charitable gifts before the new law took effect. Then in 2018, giving fell back to more familiar territory. But let's look at that a little bit more closely. In 2016, there were 1.8 million Floridians who reported charitable contributions. In 2017, as donors scrambled to take advantage of the old rules before they changed, the number of reporting donors jumped to more than 2 million. And then in 2018, after the new rules took effect, the number of donors who were reporting charitable contributions plummeted to 758,000. For thousands of taxpayers, there was no longer an advantage to reporting those charitable contributions. But although the number of donors dropped, something unexpected happened. In 2016, Floridians gave $13.5 billion. In 2017, with more than 1 million additional donors, Floridians gave $17.8 billion. And in 2018, even though the number of donors fell by more than half, the amount of money given was almost the same as in 2016. So is that unusual? Yes, very unusual. Of the 50 states and the District of Columbia, Florida was second best at maintaining the level of charitable giving in the face of tax law changes. So let's walk through this table a little bit. We're comparing 2016 before the law changed to 2018 after the law changed. On the far right, you can see how all of the states saw huge declines in the number of reporting donors, including Florida. In the middle column, you see the change in the amount of money given. And Florida's result, while still barely negative, is so much better than the other states and so much better than the national average. So why? What happened in Florida? Florida's charitable giving stayed strong not because of a statewide trend. It stayed strong because giving in 10 counties was extraordinarily strong. Look at your Palm Beach County, for example. Between 2016 and 2018, giving there increased by more than $530 million. In Collier County on the West Coast, it was up by more than $100 million. And in Walton County and the Panhandle, giving was up $35 million. These big jumps countered counties such as Broward, Duval, Orange, and Manatee, who not only saw the number of donors decline, but the amount of dollars given decline as well. While individual giving in Florida overall has remained stable in recent years, it's due primarily to extremely generous giving in South Florida. Across most of the Sunshine State, there's been a decline in individual giving, which you can see on this chart here. Your region, however, is the shining star of charitable giving in the state of Florida. Martin is one of only 2 counties where individual giving increased more than 30% from 2016 to 2018, and Palm Beach County is the top county in contributions in the state. So let's take a closer look at your 2 counties. Martin County's total contributions do not dip in 2018, they actually rise, which is different than the state overall and most of the rest of the counties. And Florida overall, giving from 2016 to 2018 dropped less than 1% and stayed pretty much even. In Martin County, though, it increased about 30%, growing from $227 million to $322 million over that 2-year period. When we look at how the number of donors changed from 2016 to 2018, however, Martin County more closely mirrors the trends that we see for the state. Donors in Martin County rose 8% from 2016 to 2017, compared to 9% for the state overall, and dropped 60% from 2017 to 2018, compared to 63% for the state overall, so very similar. Amazingly, though, in Martin County, 60% fewer donors gave slightly more money than the year before. In Palm Beach County, it more closely follows the state trend because 2018 contributions dropped from 2017. However, there are two major differences between Palm Beach County and the state. While contributions in Florida overall increased about 9% from 2016 to 2017, they increased 44% in Palm Beach County. And unlike Florida averages, the 2018 contributions in Palm Beach County are well above the 2016 contributions, about 27% more. The other thing to note is the sheer level of giving in Palm Beach County, a high in 2017 of $3.6 billion, and in 2018, still an impressive $2.5 billion. I see a question come in. Does this data account for contributions to private foundations or just public charities? I don't think we have that level of detail. This is anything that would have been a tax deduction that someone claimed on their personal taxes would be represented in this. So it could be both. Donors in Palm Beach County rose 10% in 2017 to 1,000 and dropped 58% in 2018 to just over 84,000 people. In 2018, Palm Beach County donors made up 11% of the state's total, more than the 7% of tax filers Palm Beach County has. When we look at the county ratings, Palm Beach and Martin counties are consistently highly ranked. Palm Beach County is #1 in total contributions, as we mentioned before, more than $2.5 billion, with the third most donors in the state. And Martin County is 11th with $322 million and is 20th in the number of reporting donors for the state. Those are impressive numbers, and the good news for you, it kind of keeps coming. When we look at the change in giving from 2016 to 2018, Martin and Palm Beach counties ranked 2 and 3 respectively. Martin increased almost 42% and Palm Beach County almost 27%. Remember, only the top 10 counties in the state listed here had any growth at all. The rest of the 57 counties had negative growth from 2016 to 2018. Participation rate is defined as the number of people who itemized their donations compared to the number of tax filers in the county. Palm Beach and Martin counties tie for third place in participation rate at 11.4% each. So not only are donations high, but your two counties have a comparatively high number of people who are giving those donations. While it's important to track the amount of charitable gifts made by individuals, it's equally important to understand something about the donors, the people who are making the gifts. Remember, this does not tell us anything about what organizations donors are supporting or where they're giving. It's simply looking at how much they are giving each year based on where they file their taxes. In addition to telling us how many donors there are, the IRS tells us a little bit about their income levels. According to the IRS definitions, lower income donors are those with an adjusted gross income or AGI of less than $100,000. Middle income donors are those with an AGI between $100,000 and $200,000. And the upper income donors are those with an AGI above $200,000. It might surprise you to know that in 2007, before the recession, 70% of Florida's reporting donors were lower income. They had an AGI of less than $100,000. By 2011, that proportion was down to 65%, and it continued to decline steadily until by 2018, fewer than half of Florida donors were lower income. Meanwhile, the number of upper income donors has been increasing steadily, then had a big jump in 2018. Upper income donors now make up proportionately more of the donors than ever before. The percent of Florida donors who are upper income has increased, resulting in a donor mix in 2018 that's very different from what we saw just 7 years prior. The light green on this chart represents upper income donors, the gray represents middle income donors, and the teal represents the lower income donors. So you can see the change there that we've experienced. So not surprisingly, the source of the charitable gifts has also changed. 3/4 of today's gifts in Florida come from upper income donors in that light green, compared with less than half in 2011. Correspondingly, the gifts from middle and lower income donors have shrunk. So let's take a look at Palm Beach and Martin counties. Martin is on your left on the screen and Palm Beach is on the right. Although compared to the state as a whole, both counties have always had more upper income donors. The trend that we see is similar to what we see across the state. Increasing numbers of upper income donors and decreasing numbers of lower income donors. However, the one difference for you all is that the number of middle income donors stays the same in Martin and increases slightly in Palm Beach, which is different than our state averages where they both shrank. So that would be viewed as a good trend for donor income diversity for those two counties. When we look at the source of the gifts, the picture changes. Compared to the state averages, both Martin on the left and Palm Beach on the right have had many more donations coming from upper income donors, and that's increasing over time. 28% of middle income donors that we saw on the previous slide give only 6% of the charitable donations in your counties. But the upper income donors are giving approximately 90% of all gifts in both Martin and Palm Beach County. Here we look at the longitudinal differences between the average amount of charitable gifts in 2011 and 2018, and between Martin and Palm Beach counties and the state overall. So although the size of donations has increased for all income levels between 2011 and 2018, the upper income donors have increased their gifts the most, especially in Martin County. Martin County ranks third in average gift size in the state, with the average gift being almost $36,000. Palm Beach County ranks sixth at just over $30,000 gift per donor on average. So why do we want to know what donors are thinking? Why does that change in donors matter to the state overall? Well, consider this. Of the more than 10 million tax filers in the state of Florida in 2018, the weight of individual charitable giving is carried by a mere 210,750 upper income donors. And not only are the donors relatively few in number, they are also clustered in certain pockets of the state. So donors in 4 South Florida counties, Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Collier gave 46% of all reported charitable gifts in Florida in 2018. And more than 1/3 of that money came from upper income donors in Palm Beach County alone, 28,480 of them. So although that's really good news for Palm Beach County, that doesn't necessarily make our donors in the state be very geographically diverse. Given this, it's no surprise that overall, fewer Floridians engage in charitable giving than their peers nationwide. The participation rate calculates the percentage of all tax filers who report contributions. Back in 2001, the national rate was slightly above 30%, while Florida's rate was just below 25%. Through the years, Florida continues to lag the nation in the rate of those who make contributions. You can see here, though, that the good news for your 2 counties is that participation rates are higher than both the state and the US averages. The question then becomes for Palm Beach and Martin counties, how do we make sure we sustain that and maybe even grow that over time? So given what we know today, what are we interested in watching in the years ahead, both from the Florida Nonprofit Alliance perspective, but also the sector as a whole? What are the things that we really want to look out for? The first one, that extreme generosity that we're seeing, especially in Palm Beach, Martin, and other South Florida counties. We suspect some of that generosity might be fueled by donors bundling their gifts. So they might be giving $30,000 in a single year to take advantage of those tax deductions rather than $10,000 a year over 3 years. Will that lead to more volatility in giving totals year to year? We're not sure yet. Shrinking pool of donors. Giving USA reports 68% of US giving in 2018 comes from individuals, but that number was 75% in 2007. We see the same thing in Florida. This is clearly not sustainable. And while not currently a problem for you all in Palm Beach and Martin counties, we want to know if this is a possibility for the future, especially if there's one that we can proactively tackle and get ahead of and make sure that's not happening in your counties going forward. Under the radar giving. Is the pool of donors shrinking because reporting is down or because giving is down, or most likely some combination of the two? So are folks no longer reporting their gifts to the IRS, still giving in other ways, or are they giving at the same level? We know that tax incentives are more effective at encouraging donors to give more as opposed to stimulating new giving. Alternative giving channels, GoFundMe accounts and other direct appeals have grown in popularity. We're not sure to what extent they will siphon dollars away from more traditional giving channels. So something we want to keep an eye on. Because most of those gifts go unreported and may not be tax deductible, we have very little data to help us understand this change. Tax incentives, as I mentioned before, these are especially important for counties like yours because the research suggests that they are most effective in encouraging more giving from existing donors rather than encouraging new donors. So with the situation in Palm Beach and Martin counties, does changing tax policy affect the way people view those incentives and therefore their charitable giving over time? And then finally, the generational shift that we all have seen coming in all parts of our society, including in fundraising and giving. Many experts say younger donors are more quote unquote cause-oriented and investing in advocacy and driving social change with less regard for any tax advantages that giving may bring. So how do those changes impact our understanding of giving? Understanding giving is hard, measuring it is hard, and much of what we know is imprecise, but we can see the trends, and we know that charitable giving has an enormous impact on our communities, on our nonprofits, and the effect that we have in our communities. And so we believe it's well worth the effort it takes to unpack and understand our own generosity.
So
I'll turn it back over to Sabine to talk about what FNA is doing with this information.
Thanks, Leah. So some of the next steps that we're going to cover today include tax incentives, donor engagement, generational shifts in giving and volunteering, advocacy, and more research. So let's start with tax incentives. Something that we're going to continue to do is advocate for charitable giving incentives as part of our legislative agenda. What nonprofits can do is make sure that they're also advocating for themselves with tax incentives for charitable giving, especially when changes are proposed or threatened. We're also going to continue to keep the nonprofit sector up to date on those changes as we did in 2018 and will continue to do with COVID-19 relief measures at the state and federal level. It's also really important when tax incentives do come up that nonprofits are also advocating and informing their donors and stakeholders of when those changes are coming up in the pipeline and those new deadlines. We're also going to be looking at donor engagement. We're going to be sharing this research with the funding community and the media outlets around the state. Specifically for nonprofits, we hope that you will encourage, promote giving at all levels for individuals, not just those who are perceived to have high net worth. We're going to be working with our partners to provide access to training to do donor engagement. We hope nonprofits will use this as an opportunity to develop new volunteer opportunities. Active volunteers are local targets and they become donors. Florida's soft giving culture applies to volunteering as well, especially in the age of COVID-19. We know that volunteering is down. It's also part of our legislative agenda. We also work closely with Volunteer Florida. So if any ways we can do to encourage more volunteerism in the state, we're going to be looking to do so. Generational shifts. We're going to be hoping to use this information in partnership with you all to have conversations with younger donors about their preferences in giving and their plans in general for giving in the future. We also want to better understand the trends in generational wealth transfer in Florida, especially as family foundations shift how they're giving as well. Advocacy, which is at the crux of what we do. We're using this data to educate elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels on the changing trends of nonprofit giving. One of the things we hear all the time is that fundraising can make up the difference in the low revenues. And we just want to make sure that they understand that's not universal across the board. Each county is not the same. Each nonprofit is not the same. And so that they're aware of the data for their local districts so they can better understand that picture. We hope you will also be using this data to do your own outreach and your own conversations with elected officials, especially now that they're going to be in the districts from Tallahassee since session's ending. The other components that we hope that we're going to be useful to you is we are in partnership with the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University in a strong research project funded by the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. This is going to be doing market survey analysis for looking at a lot of the things to watch that Leah referenced. Do individuals give? You know, it's great that Palm Beach and Collier have those high net worth donors that are giving in the state, but are they actually giving in the communities that they live in, or are they giving in different states across the country? So the markets analysis will be looking at specific questions for these individual donors. We're going to be polling 3 groups of donors: high net worth donors, fixed income donors, and moderate age group donors, so 40 to 50-year-olds, and really asking them, are they giving within the state? How do they identify a nonprofit within the state? Can they use resources or help in identifying causes or communities that they care about? How are they trending with online giving versus individual relationships with funding communities? Really to better understand how these individuals that are present in Florida, that are leading to our rise in how we are perceived across the country as a giving state, but to ensure that that's actually helping the sector within the state. That's something we don't know yet. So we're hoping that research will allow us to do so. This research will be completed by early 2022, and we'll share that out once it's available. So next steps, really, we want to make sure that you're having conversations at the community level about how this data is relevant for you. As Vicki mentioned, this is something their community foundation thinks about all the time. What should the nonprofit sector do with this data, including donors? You know, how can you have this conversation with your board, cultivating new donors? And the data is available free of charge. You can access it on our website at flnonprofits.org under research, and you'll see the charitable giving data for Palm Beach, along with the other counties that we've done, and for the state, if useful to you. So with that, we'll open it up for any questions or discussions.
We invite everybody to unmute your sound when you're speaking and asking a question, and please join us via video screen here. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but please feel free to ask your questions of our great speakers. Thank you, Sabine and Leah. Great presentation.
And I did have a question about whether we would share these slides. Yes, we'll share the slides along with the report. And I believe also the Community Foundation is going to share the recording with you as well.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, Leah. I do have a question. I am on the board of AFP Global's Association of Fundraising Professional Global's Government Relations and PAC committees. May I share these reports with their government liaison?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we would love that. And if there's anything we can do to help share that information, just let us know.
Vicki, I am curious from your foundational perspective, seeing this data, does it reaffirm some of the things that you've been seeing, or does it make you question certain things, given your boots on the ground and do this day in and day out?
I think there weren't any surprise. Well, maybe there were surprises. The shoot up in the amount of giving in Palm Beach County is so robust right now. Maybe that's not surprising, but we led the state so much more robustly than some of the other counties in Florida. So that was a little surprising. We know that more and bigger gifts are coming from a smaller amount of donors. That's been a trend in our foundation. I mean, we're seeing that trend. And yes, you know, how are we going to address that trend, and how do we get some of that next gen engagement in our work? I love the thought around that. So maybe I'll ask that as a question back to you, Sabine. You've talked to a lot of other foundations like us who've invested in this research. What are they telling you about next gen donors, and how are they engaging in their philanthropy.
One of the examples that we've seen, and I'm not sure how many other community foundations across the state do this, but here in Jacksonville, the local Community Foundation of Northeast Florida, has something called a Weaver Philanthropic Fellowship. And it's essentially to cultivate that next generation of leadership. So a lot of these are individuals within their 40s who either come from families of wealth, have acquired wealth, or have created new companies that have put them on that trajectory. And they do a 9-month fellowship with them to really make them understand the landscape here locally, connect them with the sector, connect them with different foundations, to really give them a footing as to why philanthropic dollars are important, why charitable giving is important outside of the new models that are shaping up in our communities. And that has led to these individuals creating funds and different foundations to give within their community. So that's something we've seen locally that has worked really well. They've been doing it for well over 5 years, and that they're cultivating the next generation of donors to ensure that they stay within the community and give within the community. I know when we did this for Collier, Eileen Connolly-Kiesler, the CEO there, mentioned that they do have to have conversations with their high AGI donors around why it's important to give within the community, because many of these donor funds are giving outside of Florida as well. And so community foundations have served as a great way to connect nonprofits to those donors and really identify those causes that are passion driven for those donors. But the individual has to ultimately make that decision too.
I think the other thing to remember, we've spent so much of the last 15 years or so thinking about millennial donors and what they want. But now the youngest millennials are in their 30s, right? So now we have to think about Gen Z also and what they are interested in and what their preferences are going to be. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more research and conversations with that generation, because the millennials are not the young bucks anymore. They're getting to be, kind of in that middle age group. Sabine, we had a question come in that I think might relate to the Lilly study of individual giving. Are we going to be collecting any data on number of gifts from volunteers to organizations?
So our advisory council's first meeting is coming up on June 23rd, which is where we'll be finalizing the questions for the survey. But we are going to be looking at a rough ballpark of each individual's gifts within the state. And we're also going to be asking them if they volunteer within the state. So we'll be asking those 2 questions. We won't necessarily be lumping the questions together as if you're a volunteer, do you give to that organization? But that I can make a note of that and see how the school feels about that information as well.
Hi, I'm Barb Wilson. I'm the one who asked that question because the data has proven over the years that the highest number of bequest giving can come from volunteers, not necessarily year-to-year annual giving. So that would be a very interesting statistic to collect. 1, do you volunteer with an organization? 2, have you ever made a gift as a result of your volunteerism? Because so often they think time, I give my time, I don't have to give money. They need to understand we need their money too. And the second thing about generational givers, I have 2 sons. They both work for Microsoft, and they have, one's in their late 30s, one's in their early 40s. And through their corporation, they have formed their own individual foundations because they are really particular about where their giving is going and that what they're giving is being spent on what they want it to be spent on. And so they feel that the best way to do that is to form their own foundations, separate from any community foundation or, so that's an interesting thing. And their friends who are all kind of upper income Gen X people, not that they're necessarily starting their own foundations, but they are really particular about their giving, what it's being allocated for, and how often people send them mail about giving. It totally turns them off. I just share that from personal experience.
Thanks, Barbara. You actually brought up two important pieces that will be covered in that Lily piece. The first is, have they set up a bequest? Because that's something we are curious about. If they're looking at it, well, I'll take care of it in the future. And the second piece is corporate giving. We've actually heard from a lot of corporate foundations that employees are not always availing the volunteer dollars and service dollars and matches that are available within their entity. So for example, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar, but Disney matches up to $25,000 for any park employee, for any corporate employee. So that's lots and lots of thousands of people within the state of Florida that have not tapped that resource. And so looking at that piece as well, how do we encourage individuals who work at corporations that have dollars available to them? If you volunteer X number of hours, that automatically transfers into a donation to a charity of your choice. If you give, make sure you tell us, and then we'll match it. And so really using those resources available within our state as well to maximize those dollars back into the community. I see a question around causes and gifts. Unfortunately, that's anecdotal. There really isn't a way currently to specify how and where people are giving unless they share that information with us. So for the research that we'll be doing to expand on this work, we are going to be asking on how they identify nonprofits and how they choose to connect with nonprofits. So that will share some of those causes, but there's no data that says causes alongside gifts.
At least not at the state level. Giving USA does break it down for the country as a whole, but they do not have state level information that they share. And one more thing on the information from Barbara that she shared. I think the other thing is, you mentioned outside of community foundations, but the other thing that we're seeing, Vicki, I'm sure you all are too, is the increase in donor advised funds that people are starting. So they still have a little bit more control over, what they're doing with their particular money. And that also kind of goes back into the idea of bundling. So they get more tax benefits from giving one large gift at one time and may start something like a donor advised fund or an account at Fidelity to do their charitable giving rather than doing their annual giving. Vicki, is that something that you guys are?
Yeah, thank you, Leah, for saying that. And Barbara, I was actually kind of surprised by your comment on people looking for foundations to set up foundations, because we're seeing a trend kind of in the opposite direction, because foundations have such restrictions and have requirements that donors are just not interested in. They want to give their money away impactfully. They want to have a little more control over the assets over time. They can put more money in. They can bunch their gifts, as Leah said. There's just so much flexibility built into a donor advised fund. So we're seeing less foundation setups and more donor advised fund setups, still with that direction from the donor. They still, they still support the specific charities they want to support.
I'll advise them of that. I don't think they actually thought of it, and they kind of went off and did this on their own. It's like they could have asked me,
yeah.
but I'll put that forth because they may get to a point where they don't want to manage their own little foundation.
Yeah, and they can convert a foundation to a DAF. That's a possibility.
Okay, thanks, Vicki.
There's another question. Oh, go ahead, Leah.
Oh, I was just going to say another really good thought-provoking question about whether nonprofits that collaborate receive larger donations. Sabine, do you know if that's the case?
I mean, I would say, if we think about the collective impact model, which is something that was really big 4 or 5 years ago, from that element, yes, you can receive larger institutional dollars, whether it be to a county or a collaborative, and then, that's divided accordingly to really show that they're, especially nonprofits that are within a specific niche, like early childhood or education or housing, are working together. They're able to leverage larger dollars together. I don't know if ultimately that leads to larger dollars individually for organizations, but we know plenty of instances where individuals have been able to access larger grants because of that collaboration.
Yeah, and there may also be something, if you look at organizations who are really doing collaborations well and investing the time and resources then to take it, there's probably something about that readiness to be that collaborative that probably also means they have infrastructure for things like fundraising, that there may be some correlation there. I don't know if there's a causation, but it's a really good question, something to think about.
Any other questions?
I'll go ahead and share our contact information in case you all want to reach out to us directly. You have Sabine and my email address on the screen, and of course our website, flnonprofits.org. We'll be sharing this out with you afterwards, and we hope that it's helpful, useful for you all in Palm Beach and Martin counties. And if there's any other questions or help that we can provide, I hope that you all will feel like you can reach out to us. We'll be happy to do whatever we can to help with that. And we'll take any last questions that you have as well.
Yeah,
We
and
can-
oh, go ahead, Vicki.
We can give Sabine and Leah a virtual clap. Thank you for your great presentation. The Community Foundation for Palm Beach and Martin Counties is really grateful for your presentation and excited about our partnership with the Florida Nonprofit Alliance and this continued wonderful data that hopefully we'll be working on together.
And I just want to give a shout out to our former board chair, Upendo, that I see is on the call as well. Hi, Upendo.
All right, everybody, we are going to leave you. Thank you so much for joining us again and have a great day. Raise a lot of money.
Thank you.